right. Now we are recording, I think.
Yeah. Great.
So since we have been chatting for a bit, I would love to recap why Jocelyn and we are meeting here. And we are chatting about microsolidarity. Woo!
Woo, surprise. Yay.
Right. So Jocelyn was kind enough to offer an hour to talk about microsolidarity in Berlin. And I have reached out to you because I find that there are so many little silos of potential in Cologne by now that I'm curious to learn how you went about the microsolidarity experiments in Berlin. And my intent was to get a little bit of inspiration how these very spontaneous, very playful and unstructured silos could be given a structure for even more meaningful communities of belonging that also have a safe foundation so that it does not get derailed or misused or just does some obvious mistakes in becoming more of a long-term community. And since you have so much experience, would be lovely if you could walk through how the Berlin experiment went, maybe also share what the intention was there and how you went about it and what was the outcome after the experiment.
Yeah. That's great. I think it's cool because I think me and the others who co-created and co-facilitated the Berlin Microsolidarity experiment were kind of starting from a similar question of like, there's like some amazing bubbles of community around Berlin, and yet there seemed to be something where we thought there could be like a deepening of a sense of belonging, or there could be a bit more structure given, like with this microsolidarity practice or principles and frameworks that would help those communities find more like interdependence and just connect the dots a bit more between each other. I think they're pretty good at like having this, as you said, like playful, unstructured, or semi-structured, actually, some of them more structured than others, sort of meaningful fun and sort of synchronicity or regularity of meeting. But there was still in each group something where it was like, with just a bit of support, this could go really deep. And also that those communities could actually connect. We saw a lot of potential in those communities connecting and coming together, or at least representatives from those communities coming together in a sort of congregation of crews in a way that they could learn from each other. And I think it was pretty successful in a number of different ways how that happened. I was just telling you a little bit about one example of there was one community living just outside Berlin. They sort of live kind of on the land together, about 20 of them, and they'd been wrestling with an internal conflict there for a long time. And in one of we had some structured sessions, but we also had informal hangout sessions once a week in person. And it was just beautiful how those emergent spaces, especially throughout the 6 weeks of this journey, deepened in people getting to know each other and exploring what support do they each need, and being able to reflect back with a lot of like presence and loving care, like, and curiosity into each other's challenges. And so this group brought a certain challenge, and it was just amazing to hear different people giving reflections, and by the end they were like, I think it's just something we hadn't thought about before. Like maybe we just need a sort of a time to mourn and grieve together. And I heard that was very supportive, and they went back and it has actually transformed the conflict quite a bit. And just coming together and getting outside perspective from people you trust. I think it really contributed to a lot of transformation or next steps in different people in different ways for different those different cohorts of communities around Berlin. Yeah, maybe it helps to share a bit what the structure was, what it was about. But yeah, there was a core crew of 6 of us. So that was myself and Nikki, Carl, Catherine, Ruby, and Felipe. And particularly myself, Nikki, Carl, and Felipe were created this 6-week program, which started with a sort of introduction to theory and principle and practices of scales in microsolidarity in an in-person afternoon. And then we had 4 hybrid online calls where everyone got into a crew on that first meeting, and the crews would meet together in person or online as much as whatever was possible for them. And they'd go through some practices on certain topics together. Like one was a case clinic week. Another one was around feedback and supportive feedback. And another one was around collective decision making. So just skills and tools that created belonging together, but also upskill people into actually being able to collaborate and work together and make more of their existing bond. And at the end, we did a retro in person as many people as possible who could come. And yeah,
so
maybe you have some questions at this point.
Yeah, I do. Thanks. So first of all, what I understand is that there were some connections between the communities that you connected through the beehive model, but the people did not all know each other beforehand.
Exactly. Yeah, there were that was an interesting thing about, I think, who we invited made an important impact to the success of it, because I think everybody who was there knew at least one or a handful of people, because we'd invited people specifically because they already had they were starting off already with some awareness of like belonging as a superpower, you know, they get that, and maybe a longing to deepen in community. They're already community minded. They're already gathering in a congregation of sorts. And I think there was I think everybody knew at least somebody there. And yes, the beehive model you're speaking about was that we were sort of the central or core crew, and then the idea that Nikki had illustrated was to try and form 6 crews of 6 people who would be like participant crews, and we actually went through the program together with them at the same time within our hosting crew, which was a bit much actually. I think next time I'd say like, let's the hosting crew just be facilitating. But yeah, that was the idea.
So do I understand this right then, that of the facilitating crew, every member was also part of one of the other connected crews?
Oh no, that would have been an interesting idea actually, but no, we stuck as our crew together. Yeah.
And then the format was chosen in a way that for each of the week you would have one topic. Let's say, I don't know, an important capability out of the microsolidarity world. Like you mentioned, I think, conflict, you mentioned scale, you mentioned retro. And then what did you do during that week with that capability?
So it was an online session where we'd give a bit of theory up front, for example, around different models of collective decision making. And then we'd invite one person from each group to be the facilitator each week. So they would rotate facilitation within their group, which maybe speaks a bit to your question later around like safety and, you know, like that it doesn't become a sort of hierarchical thing of you just telling everyone what to do, but that as much as possible, the people in each crew could experience what it's like to embody like shared facilitation or shared leadership and practice facilitation and the art of hospitality. We also encouraged them to try and meet at different people's house each week. It was really important that everybody who joined was local to Berlin. That was one of the conditions as well, because we wanted to make this very much like, how can we support connection within our city? And in fact, next time we would not do anything online, we do everything in person. That's what our idea is. So your question was, what did we do in each week? Yeah, so they rotated facilitation. We'd give some theory, and the facilitator would read through. I think what worked best were the weeks when we'd given them like a practice sheet with instructions of prompts, and that they would go through. The facilitator would help the group to go through the practices, and so it was as much as possible. We tried to make it that that they could sort of go through it on their own. So we met all online and we shared the theory, and then they went off just in their group to do the practice, and then we came together at the end to harvest reflections. Yeah, not all the sessions were so much had given the crews so much time on their own. I think we started off being a bit more facilitator heavy, and I'd like to experiment even more to try and give even more space to them just going through the practice on their own. Maybe even doing like videos. Nikki and I are talking about like maybe we just prepare videos that people watch and they don't even come together as the whole congregation, or they just come together very briefly and they can go completely on their own to do the practices. Yeah, I could talk about the replicability, the wish that we have for making it replicable for other people all around the world later, if you're interested to double click on that one. But yeah, that was kind of the structure, and I think it was an hour and a half each week. But that was quite short. I think we want to do 2 hours to really, especially if you've got a group of 6 people doing the practice. Either we make it 2 hours, the whole thing, or we make the crews smaller so that each person in the crew has time to share with each other. I think the crews, there were mostly 6 of them, but of course not everybody could come each week. So sometimes there are just 4 people in the group. And I definitely noticed in the harvest the people who had just 4 people in their group that week seemed to like come away feeling much more like energized and uplifted and having like felt spacious. And the ones that had 6 in their group had felt a bit rushed and like, oh, we didn't manage to share everybody. Not everybody managed to share. Yeah. And we also tried to make the practices as specific to the actual real lived situation as possible. So for example, the collective decision-making practice was towards the end, and there had been some things that had been challenging. For example, the crewing process wasn't really, it had some glitches and it was challenging for some people. So we invited them to do a collective decision-making process around, if you were to facilitate the next iteration of this program, you know, decide together how you would do the crewing formation practice. Yeah, so they were already like retroing the challenges that they experienced. Yeah, another practice example we gave them as an alternative was, how would you integrate people who couldn't make it on the first day? Because that was also quite a challenge. Some people couldn't make it to the start, and that left them feeling quite, I think it was quite challenging for them to get it and to feel part of it until like towards the end, and they're like, oh, now I'm feeling it. So yeah, how would you integrate latecomers? Yeah.
Yeah, this I feel we are already quite in the nuts and bolts of it. What's still on my mind too is obviously you had in the facilitators crew some people very experienced with facilitation. And also you created from that experience, I understand, the whole 6-week agenda, right? Like what topics are part of it. How would you go about doing this in a space where you do not have 3 or more people with the same background of facilitation? How would you go about it? And also, since you mentioned that, I don't know if I heard that quite right, if that is a potential topic within the crews as well, how would you approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, you know, when you were asking me just now, like, how could I create, you know, silos to structure this playful, spontaneous energy of belonging more, I was reflecting on the fact that when I'm talking about this 6-week thing, we're all like very experienced facilitators, and I would hope that anyone could do this, even if they're very new to facilitation. So I was also thinking there must be other easier ways, and I mean, what comes to me now is, I mean, what we on the Microsolidarity website, you know, there's a lot of practices there, and I think that's a great place that anyone could start. And if I didn't have all the experience, or if I didn't have the support of like a really good co-facilitation team, I might just do something much easier and simpler of say, hey, let's meet for 6 weeks. Maybe you could like practice this crew and congregation thing by having people, like having enough people that you can have a number of different crews and experience what that's like. And that you just decide, in advance, like, okay, what are we going to do? Like maybe we do 1 week, we just do Troika together. Next week we do case clinic. We'll do a retro at the end. We'll practice empathic listening. Like even from the Microsolidarity Practice program, anyone could just look at the prompts that we, join that, or like read or review, what prompts we use then, and just use the sort of icebreakers to get people getting to know each other at the beginning, and practice rotating facilitation throughout the journey. Like I think these principles could all be integrated in a much simpler, more like lower, like with a less need for expertise on facilitation or something like that. And also this is a program, what we did, the Berlin Microsolidarity Project program, we're actually wanting to do it again in spring, but we're also wanting to make it possible that we can make it replicable, so that we have all of the content in video format, and people could just, like, if you were, for example, you would be a great example, Bernhard, like being a facilitator, someone who's excited to generate a more intentional field of belonging in community groups in your local area, and that you could just be the one who brings people together and does the invitation, bringing people in, and then you could just let those videos run and just make sure that people are in crews, and then just support them into the practices and arrange the retro at the end, so that there could be a sort of self-guided community scale learning journey into deepening sense of belonging and meaningful.
It's a lovely idea, actually.
Yeah.
To me, I always liked the idea of having congregations as a, let's say, floor for crews to form. Which so far, it has, from my experience, it was sort of a self-selection. Because of self-selection, it worked. Like the people who were interested were also the people who were the right ones to be in the space and do facilitation if it came up. I'm a little bit, I don't know, hesitant maybe, that the more it scales and the more people who have spent less time with, I don't know, learning perhaps about the inner stance to hold when you let someone trust you more, who is essentially a little bit of a stranger, how to hold that trust in the right way, if that makes any sense. And I was curious, did you have any sort of congregation in the beginning? How you helped the crews, I don't know, form themselves? Or were the crews themselves already people who had a sort of level of trust, so that you could do this experimentation easily?
I'd say the crew forming process was the largest learning curve. The way we did it was, as I said, we learned a lot, and I would do it a bit differently. But we did take time in the first in-person meeting with everybody, or as many people as possible there, to recognize and acknowledge ourselves as a congregation. And we'd done various practices throughout that afternoon in the different scales, just to give people an embodied sense of like, what does it feel like and what can happen, what's possible in each scale. So sort of an inner parts guided meditation, a dyad to share what parts are present for you in the space. We did like a troika, or like just sharing what's the challenge you're facing right now, and just practicing listening, from having two people listening to you and giving some resonance. And then when it came to the congregation, we did these nice like you know, like when you can create, like, if it's we had a large room and we created different polls to sort of do like polls of who's in the room. So it was like, oh, this people on this side of the room, stand over there if you find it, for example, easy to make requests that support that, you know, that are good for you, and this side if you find that challenging, you know. And you can just see like how that like just gave a bit of a picture. And other things like, I'm someone who finds it easy to connect one-on-one, and I'm someone who finds it easier to connect in a large group, you know. So you get people to place themselves wherever they feel like in the room. And then after doing a few prompts, we invited the group itself to make their own polls. So some people in the group were they could express their own curiosity about the group, and the people loved that. We had to like cut it short a few times because people just kept wanting to make do more curiosity guesses and see who's who in the space. And we also did a round on that same day to close it off of invited everybody to share what's a passion project that they're working on or would like to work on. And so that's also a nice way to just get people to, I think we asked them to fill out some kind of bio sheet that everybody could read afterwards. We did invite everybody to share out loud. So that was a way of sort of acknowledging the congregation. And then we did that as a way to help to sort of give people information about how to crew. And we just let them crew. We said like, okay, just now hearing what everyone's interested in, form crews together. And that was way too open. I think it caused quite some pain in people, obviously. And what I would do next time is actually in the registration process, I'd ask people if they have specific people who they already know that they want to be in a crew together with, like people in their existing community group. For example, there are 3 people who lived in the community together. They wanted to be together. Then there were a couple of friends who had the similar wish for being in a sort of group that has an interest in political justice. There are a few other people who are interested in the health and well-being. So, you know, and maybe, yeah, if they could name that already before they even joined, then we would know, okay, there's already sort of starting points for a number of crews. And then we would just automatically put anybody who had not made a specific request into those crews, trying to get some form of gender balance possibly, or looking at creating diversity within each group, which is also a choice that you could play with. Do you want to have diversity in each group or similarity? But yeah, that's how we do it better next time to prevent so many triggers. Yeah.
All right, good. But what you shared about the polling resonated very strongly with me as one of the measures to kind of feel out yeah, I don't know. Yeah, people you might feel you might resonate easiest with, and also to feel out. Well, there's one topic we haven't covered yet, which is rules, which you said as facilitators, right? Which are obviously just safety nets of some sort. And there's a lot between what the rules stop and what, I don't know, the dynamic between people stops. So for example, in those settings where people are asked to be vulnerable, to share things, it's very easy that people just go along with it because the group is doing it, but you're not actually comfortable doing it. It's something I've heard as a feedback quite a couple of times out of different communities. So it feels, to the people sharing, it might feel invasive, although they are doing it because they feel pressured to do it. And this particular exercise might be a good way to allocate. It's sort of a similar method than the user manual, but in a dynamic group kind of way. So this is a very, very inspiring idea. Yeah. Thank you for that already.
Yeah, I want to just like circle around that aspect of trying to support participants to only go to the depth or share as much depth as they feel comfortable to. I can very much I experience and can see that happening sometimes when people like, or even when there's like a certain bubble of safety, and then afterwards they can have like a vulnerability hangover because they're like, oh, I shared so much, and maybe the next day they're like, oh, I wonder what they think of me. And I think partly that's something we just learn to adjust to, you know, within ourselves, and by getting used to being in more groups of people who are new to us. But I think there's definitely things that the facilitator can do to support. Like one is just constantly naming, like, you know, you have choice. Like, you know, only go to how deep you want to go. Maybe like in the Microsolidarity Practice program, in the first session, we explicitly name that there are like 3 levels of sharing. One is like just informational layer. There's nothing wrong with that, just saying more like facts about yourself. The next level is the personal layer, sharing more about your feelings and values. And the next most intimate layer being the interpersonal, about how does it feel to be in this space with you? You know, what does this space mean to me, or the connection mean to me? But I think maybe even more strongly than that, something that I picked up in, give an example of like the Microsolidarity summer camp, where I was hosting it with Jonas, and we kept saying to people like, you know, you don't have to stay, or there's this law of 2 feet. You don't have to stay in a workshop or a session if you don't feel like it's contributing to you, or if you're not contributing to it, or you just need something else. And I think it was very, that did happen a few times. I noticed it when I ran a session that people did that, and I was like, oh, it's great, it's happening. But I heard from others that maybe they were not sure if everyone was really feeling comfortable to do that. And I had some feedback from people saying, if we'd seen you as the hosts leaving a workshop and following your needs, that would have been really powerful, and given me more sense that's the culture here. So I think there's something about just embodying the principles of choice and pacing as a facilitator or host, or leading in your leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that from Ghent. That I don't know who started. I think Natty just left the room at some point, and that it kind of kicked it, and then suddenly people started replicating it. Yeah, for sure. But this is also what I mean about the where the facilitator experience comes in, right? So what I'm taking away from this, just to reflect a little bit back, is I think if I would want to replicate something like the experiment you have, I would probably start out with a facilitator crew for a while. Make sure that that is working really solidly, and then apply the beehive model. And what I would be curious to do is I would try to have crews where a facilitator is part of the crews that are attached to the facilitator crew. Nice. And experiment around with that, just to make sure that it's, that I don't know, that same level of scrutiny in a way, or experience is carried over, and then it might be that I would set it up that the facilitator leaves the crew eventually, if that is, or maybe if it's fun, keeps doing it. But how does that sound to you?
Yeah, first around having the generating or setting up a facilitator crew first sounds like a great idea. And in fact, when we ran this project, I mean, Carl, me, and Catherine knew each other very well because we worked together and collaborated on some really big projects, and lived together. But we didn't really know Nikki or Felipe, and only I knew Ruby, and she didn't know anybody else in the group directly. So it was really helpful that we had, like, before it started, we actually went through some of these practices in the weeks before. We met every week, once a week, to actually go through some of the practices. We didn't do it as much as we would have liked to, because eventually that time got sort of but but we did have some great sessions around, just doing a round of like listening to each other's, like everyone shared a challenge, and the people listening reflected back needs. Where there were times when we did some like inner parts work and using the internal family systems model, and the things we wanted to bring in, we practiced them ourselves, not just to know we can do it and to practice our facilitation, but also to deepen our bond as a crew, because it's like, in some ways, more is caught than taught. I like this expression that the vibe coming from the team is actually like a big element of what you actually like can bring into a group. So that was really, that's a great idea. I would totally be like, that you should do that. And I love the idea of having one facilitator in each crew, mostly because you also just get feedback of like how is each crew doing, and yes, also maybe you can support shared leadership within the crew. I would be a bit hesitant to, if the facilitator in each crew, you'd have to be a bit careful that they didn't like absorb too much of the power by trying to be helpful, and like don't become the teacher, but like let learning happen, but maybe just guide the edges and just make sure that the facilitator of each week feels supported enough, and that you could be like the sort of facilitator B in case it really got confusing. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a nice idea. I like that concept a lot. Yeah.
All right. Since we are recording, I kind of want to find a nice structured end for our chat.
Yeah.
And I think what's most alive in me is you said it was fun and successful, and you want to repeat it in next spring.
Yeah.
What were the things that make you assess that? What came up as, I don't know, as feedback or as perception that made it so valuable to you?
Yeah, I guess hearing, sometimes it's like a wave starts in the ocean, under the ocean, and you don't know how much energy there's in it until it actually reaches the shore, and then the wave builds and you see how much energy is there. There's something that I've noticed more like latently after the 6 weeks, like even now, hearing how people are sharing that they're putting the principles into practice in their workplaces, or how they've just like, I was really touched when one of the participants just in one of the hangout spaces, because we did a hangout space every Monday as well, which is just emergent time to be together, like was just really touched, saying, I feel like I've found my friends, and like just for some people, it was really clear that they were looking for belonging and they found a sense of belonging. For other people, they were looking for skills and they applied the skills to their workplace. Other people have formed crews that are still going on now. Like I'm in one actually with a co-living crew looking to create a microsolidarity co-housing space in Berlin. And yeah, there's just a bunch of people who I just hear it through the grapevine, and like, oh, they've tried that and they've tried that, and they're practicing in the community that they're living in, not trying to do all of their decision making in a big group, but doing it more in small groups and trying out different ways of making decisions. And that makes me sense like this has been helpful. And also I just love iterating things. So for me, it's more like my inner drive to like, let's try it again and do it even better. And some of that too. And I'm really excited about making this replicable, because I hear, like I have like Jonas, who I work with a lot in the microsolidarity field. He's living in Vienna. He has a group of like a similar situation. It's like, oh, all these activists and change makers, but if they had a bit more structure and know-how of this and like skills, they could really do even more and enjoy doing it more and not burn out so much. So it just feels like a real need in these spaces that I'm excited to try and meet. Yeah.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it's exciting. And if you are someone who, it's great to talk to you about this, Bernie, because as you're someone who is you're someone who I could have in mind when trying to create a more replicable structure, and I'm really enjoy hearing back, yeah, like what you need, you know, what, like from the eyes of someone who's like, I want to try and make this happen. If I had support, what's the support that I would need? So it's been really helpful hearing your questions, and yeah.
Well, it's nice that it's I always get the word wrong. Reciprocal?
Reciprocal, yeah.
Thank you, that was it.
Yeah.
All right, then I will stop the recording now and we can check out. But
Cool.
Thank you very much already.
Yeah,
This was
pleasure.
fun.
Thanks, Bernhard. Yep.